Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. Sorry if you've been waiting for the stream to start. This is live telly. It doesn't always go to plan. I am joined by Michael Taggart. Michael, it's an absolute pleasure. This is your second appearance on A Celtic State of Mind, isn't it?
I know, yeah. So, first of all, thanks very much for the first opportunity just very recently, and nice to be invited back so soon after as well. And the fact that it's a charity weekend there is something that's very close to my heart, to be able to support that kind of thing and talk about Celtic. It's a Saturday, there's a game day, what more do we need? So yeah, thanks very much for getting me back on, Paul John.
An absolute pleasure. I watched you as a fan. I watched you as a member of the audience on A Celtic State of Mind a few weeks back. I was on my way down to Liverpool. The wife was driving, and I was watching you, James, JP, talking Celtic, and there was clearly a dynamic and a chemistry between you and JP Mason. Acsom contributors and fans and people who tune in. I say fan, I don't mean fan as in you're a fan of a football team or a band. People who tune in will know JP well. He's been a tremendous contributor to A Celtic State of Mind. I love his knowledge, his opinion. We share interests in football, music, the whole thing. And often on a Thursday, we need to reel ourselves right back in because we go down a wee rabbit hole, Michael, talking about bands and gigs. How do you know JP? Give us a wee insight into your friendship with JP.
So, well, I'm originally from Ayrshire. So I grew up down in North Ayrshire in a wee town called Saltcoats. So big shout to the guys down there. There'll no doubt be a few tuned in. We used to go up on the Ross and Gary Owen. So there's another plug for the boys. And so when I moved through to university to Edinburgh, I've pretty much been here ever since. But I met JP on our university course, and he tells the story better than me, and he certainly told it a lot more times than me. But he, when we did our icebreaker in the university meet and greet on the first day, and I happened to have the Bumblebee Celtic strip underneath my jumper. So I wasn't full on, jumper off. I think it was maybe September, so it was maybe a bit chilly. And I turned around, and John Paul was the guy I had to meet, and he said, "Is that the Bumblebee top?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "That's a bit bold on your first day at uni, different people call that." So my quip to him was, "Well, you know the rules. In other words, you need to be yourself, and you need to just demonstrate that." I don't hide my colours. I never have, never will. And ever since that moment, JP and I got off on the right foot. So I introduced him, I think, to away games. And that's really when you started you opened up a different world to him, maybe. And he's told me that himself, where he was like, he'd been to Celtic matches, and, he was fortunate enough to be at some key games throughout in the lead up to that. So I can't take the credit for introducing them to Celtic, but I'm happy to have been in some many journeys with them. Taking them to a couple of the away games in the early days in the late 80s. I mean, that was quite a defining season for Celtic. Obviously, I mean, we stopped 10 in a row. I personally had moved through to university at a point where I'd been attending every week type thing. But we were losing. We were constantly getting so far. As we're not labouring the point of what it was like experiencing the other side of 9 in a row. But it was good to have someone like JP, that anybody that'll have seen him or knows him, he shares passion like I do. If you're in for something, you're up for it 100%. And so I guess that's where it started. And then before you know it, you're on away bus trips to Europe and far-flung areas of the world, and it's the banter and the crack and the camaraderie, the supporting of one another as well as the team that comes with it. So we've had good times.
Listen, it sounds brilliant because football and Celtic, it does bring people together. We know about the community aspect of the formation of our club. We've been speaking a lot around about this time of year as well, how that is important. And that's why we do the charity weekender. And there's one of the ones, Michael, where I wasn't quite sure how it was going to work the first time round, but I knew we could do something. I just knew we had started getting people interested in the live streams during the pandemic. Bring it all together. Let's see who wants to be involved. And that word community, which is huge, because you've just given me an example of that. You know, someone spots the collar, and JP being JP, right into his jerseys, the Tony green or the Tony lime on your collar, he would have known exactly what that was, and he's homed in on it. And then obviously this fledgling friendship has started, but it's the community aspect as well. And I used to always say this, you know, if you were on holiday, it was the old cliche: you see a set of hoops, there you know that's your compadre kind of thing. And
Absolutely.
what's happened is it's a strange one in terms of the media creation, because it's been a wee bit fractured, I think, because what happens is you decide to either give your view as a Celtic supporter. That's all you're doing. You're on here giving your view, and we've got around 20 or more contributors on Acsom, regulars, irregular contributions. Everybody's got their own view. There's no agenda. The only thing that binds us together is Celtic, and we can agree, disagree, argue, fall out, fall back in. And I always say, well, that's what you did anyway. That's what you did on the supporters buses. My supporters buses were obviously coming from Fife. Huge disagreements on individual performances, on players, on managers. I remember going to the games in the dark old days of that period of 9 in a row when we never won the league 9 years in a row. And some of the discussions around that obviously were kind of like dark subjects, like the board, in terms of what is the future of this football club. And as a young guy, I don't know if you were the same, you began to be educated in things that weren't, you know, talking about, oh, when am I getting the new Celtic jersey? And Paul McStay's my favourite player. It was about the board, and you were young. So you were exposed to it really early, like the real political aspect of what happens if Celtic don't do well and we've no money in the bank and we can't buy a player and stadiums falling to bits. What happens then? And I started getting into fanzines. So when I was at the game, always bought a programme. And there was a kid at my school, and at this point I was at Sacred Heart School in Pennycook, moving about with my dad's work. And again, you gravitate towards the Celtic fans. So there was a few, no many. There was a guy, Colin Dowie, from Pennycook. There was Kevin Causer from Pennycook, a guy, Scotty Allcroft, from Silcoats as well, which is the first to me knowing what that place was, because I'm a country bumpkin for Fife. How am I going to know that exotic place on the other side of Scotland? Saltcoats. I've since been back, by the way, with the Bobby Lennox statue, and which was tremendous. And you gravitate to other Celtic fans. And I remember going into school one day, and Kevin Causer had this photocopied thing that looked like a programme, but it looked like a cheap version of a programme, and it was a fanzine. And he introduced me to the world of fanzines. I'm talking late 80s, you know, we were just kids at the school. Thankfully, it wasn't confiscated, because there was obviously things in there, or adult themes and swearies and all that probably would have got us into a bit of bother. But he introduced me to Not the View, you know, this alternative way of thinking that isn't just believing everything you're fed by the club, which then I was already pretty politicised through the miners' strikes. I already didn't trust the people running the country. So as a young kid, you're walking about going, wait a minute, I don't trust the country and who runs it. I don't trust who runs my football club. Who can you trust? But what it did is it set me on this wee path of, you know, the kind of punk ethic of media, do it yourself, the DIY. And what that's then done is it's created this whole new world where Celtic fans can create a community, can chat, can disagree. And what I find brilliant about Acsom, there's so many views on it that people bend my view. You know, I've got a view on something, and then I'll talk to Alan Morrison, who's a data guy, and my view will change. Not always, but my view will change. So I love that, because I love Celtic, I love reading about it, I love talking about them. But I want to talk to you a wee bit about the fanzine culture. Did you get into that? Because it's something that for me, that a fanzine now is a podcast.
Well, I think you've shaped it pretty well in terms of the journey that a fanzine went on. I to be honest, I probably never got. I wasn't buying them. I did have a look at quite a couple. Well, there was a few that you pick up, and when you're going to games as often, somebody either leaves one line in the bus and you pick it up and you have a read at it, or if there was good. I remember the Not the View. That was probably the one that I probably read a little bit more regular. And growing up, I suppose you do start to get a bit more intrigued. I actually did read quite a lot as a kid, which is try to get my own two to do as much. These days, they're not bad, but they're not reading Not the View equivalents at the moment yet. They're only 9 and 13, but I wasn't far off it when I started to get to the point where I was starting to take more of an interest in what was going on there. But I completely agree with the fact that, just giving an opinion, to me, it was more listening to maybe some of the older guys in the bus that had a view, and they were maybe getting their views shaped from your fanzines and everything that came with it. Some of them are actually contributing to them. So, I'll not drop anybody's name in there and put them under a bus at this time of the morning, but they'll be on a bus later on today, I'm sure. But there was sometimes quite polarised opinions, even back then. That's what I remember kind of growing up. And as you say, there was some views that you almost a generation was getting educated in, as you say, that why would the youngsters coming to the game need to understand too much about the board? And again, I do think about it even with my own kids just now. As soon as Celtic lose a game, my oldest son's only seen Celtic lose in the league 1 year since he's been on the planet, whereas I was almost more to the other side, not just as bad as that, but he's he doesn't really need to think too much about boardroom discussions. He's more educated in the boardroom than me, because he'll play the fantasy football teams, and they've got their FIFA and all these games, and they'll be able to trade players. They could buy and sell you these days in terms of how the trading actually needs to work. But I suppose the political side of it, that's still to come. But I probably got a healthy balance, I would say, of my input from fanzines, and but more so shaped from the guys that I grew up going to games with, because they've been doing it longer than me, and I suppose I'm now that guy that's able to give opinions from rounded experiences over the years.
This is the thing as well, and it creeps up on you, Michael, when you become that guy. When the greys start to come through on the old hairline and what, you're like, wait a minute, I'm one of the vets here. I think they call you the Celtic Da. But that's exactly what it is. And by the way, I think it's a badge of honour. I remember being on a bus, and it was Jokie Munnion's bus. He was a Valleyfield boy who lived in Blair Hall, and it was basically Fife Village Celtic fans who would get on this bus. And I remember them telling us the story that he drove to Milan for the 1970 European Cup final, and there was a couple of guys still getting on the same bus. And Jokie never spoke all the way back. These tales. And you're sitting there as a kid going, wow, a European what? A European Cup final? It was a second. And you start to get the history of the football club as well. And the history is so important. But that community aspect, Michael, I just feel that we had a platform that people were tuning into. And I thought, you know what? Every Christmas, let's do something. 24-hour. With breaks now. The first time I did it, there were no breaks, Michael. I learned pretty quickly you need breaks in between the streams.
Absolutely.
Because 24 hours is a long one. And raise awareness of something. So we've raised awareness about homelessness and, mental health issues, kids that are less fortunate as well around about this time of year. Let's do things for these people. St. Mary's, the birthplace of Celtic. And this year, Jamie Tierney. So Jamie suffers from Duchenne muscular dystrophy. And I've actually got somebody in the comments section here, Double Down. I'm going to bring this up. I have a friend with muscular dystrophy and have seen firsthand how debilitating it can be. But treatment does make a huge difference. Really hope we can help little Jamie and his family. And I can tell you the family are absolutely delighted with all the help all the Celtic fan base and community have already given them. It makes a world of difference to them to know that people are thinking about their wee boy and donating, not just financially, but also items. I received yesterday a signed Celtic football through the door. There's no return address on it. And they have basically at some point asked me for my address so they can send this. so that we can raffle it off or auction it off. The last hour today, we're going to have a live auction, and it's not about trying to get big money from individuals. It's about having a lot of items, and if we can get a few quid from each of the items, then we'll give all that money to wee Jamie's family as well. So that's on the last hour, which will be 6 till 7 o'clock, because Kevin Graham got me out of my bed early this morning because he wanted to do the first stream at 7 a.m. But I would implore you to go and watch it, because Kevin premiered his first EP, the Celtic Cross Collective's 5 songs, a few swearies at 7 in the morning. We might get a few rows from some of our regular listeners for that. Go and have a listen. It's on the YouTube channel. Ewan Boy Martin, another regular contributor. Good morning to you, sir. I hope you enjoyed your birthday celebrations. Morning Troop says Northampton. Tim, where are you watching the Acsom Weekender from? Let us know where in the world, because let me check my schedule, 12 o'clock, we have Yatal and Liam Carrigan, who are both based in Japan. They're going to be coming on to do a whole hour for our Japanese fan base. They're actually going to do it in Japanese, Michael. So fair play to them. I will tune in and I'll try and comment, but we'll see how that goes. So the worldwide fan base, where are you watching the Acsom Weekender? We've also got Jungle Lion, a regular morning to you as well. We've got the Hearts game coming up. We're going to be covering that as a watch along also, and we also have Jim Orr coming up next with Des McLean, followed by Yato, Liam Carrigan, followed by Laura Bradburn. Loads to look forward to. I'm going to go back to that point then, where, the first period of time that I'm supporting Celtic, we're not winning anything, Michael. Introduced in person to the centenary season, and you think, wow, this is what it's all about. Oh, I could get used to this, and then realizing pretty quickly it's not always like that, and then season on season, it seemed to gradually get worse. Losing Billy McNeil as a manager was huge. I remember they'd done a cartoon on the back of at the time, I think it was a Sunday Mail, big cartoon, The Fall of Caesar it was. And you're thinking to yourself, where do you go from there? There was this feeling, Michael, where do you go from here? Because, you've got Jock Stein. I had gone further back with the history books, but you've got Jock Stein, Billy McNeil, Davy Hay, Billy McNeil. And you think, where do we go now? It had to be an ex-player in my mind that managed Celtic, but we tried something different. What was your feelings at that time? Was it exciting? Am I rewriting history? Because Liam Brady was a massive name, wasn't he?
Well, I can actually remember it because the build-up, I was fortunate enough, my dad, who's, if he's managed to work YouTube, he'll probably be watching today, but he took me, my mum, we were my auntie, we'd family along, and we went to the centenary season as it was building up, and the crescendo towards the end when we, beat Dundee, and then I also remember the very last match with Dunfermline, and it just came to me there just now, but how vivid that Jim Leishman was the manager of Dunfermline at the time, and so we secured the title, got the trophy, and so on. And I remember Jim Leishman coming over, and he spoke so well about Celtic, and he was, he was a guy there that had really. It was probably the first time I ever learned to respect another manager from another team, and it was because he was showing respect to Celtic. He almost felt like he was part of this fantasy fairy tale that Celtic winning the league in the centenary season, then following it up with the late goals to win the double. And I suppose you go from that state of mind, and then I remember still being in primary school, and we had a vote. This goes back to, I heard the person on just before me, and he was saying about kids not involved in football, and as much, and fortunately mine are, but I remember back then everything, it was, as soon as that bell went, you were out there kicking the ball about and stuff. But I remember we had a teacher, and we had a poll in the primary 7 class, I think it was, and it was who should be the next Celtic manager. That was St Brendan's school down in Saltcoats, and Liam Brady got the vote, because he was even kids that maybe didn't know as much about football. He was the name. He was the one that your parents were feeding you, going, "Oh, Liam Brady, Republic of Ireland, Arsenal legend, played in Italy." This is a guy that if we're not going to get a Celtic player, we're going to get almost what would be seen as the next best thing. And it should have worked. it's like most things, they're great in theory, but what ends up happening, and it changed the, I suppose, the dynamic. And I suppose when we flick forward a little bit towards what was an ill-fated 10 in a row campaign for us, everything went to getting that first hurdle. And back then it was the centenary double. I think we were one of the first, or certainly one of the first two to win the centenary in the double in our centenary season anywhere. These are things that sticks in my mind. I'm thinking, well, we're a ticket here. We're a team this is what it's all about. Who would not love this? And then to start to see the years that followed, it's like, well, did we put everything into it? Did we put too much into it? Did we just get a bit ambitious with stuff that was away from what a more steady plan could have been? Should it have been a player? Why did it not work? You start to have a bit of doubt. And growing up, looking at that, you're thinking, well, what happens next? If he didn't work and we were voting for him in the classroom, who do we vote for next? And I guess from there, you do fall into a bit of disarray and it panned out that way, for years to follow the centenary season.
Yeah, it did. And you're right about the dynamic, because again, you're looking back on this. If I go back to even Jimmy McGrory as a manager, he's an ex-player who goes away and does something elsewhere at Kilmarnock as a manager. Then he comes to Celtic. Jock Stein, ex-player, goes to Dunfermline, goes to Hibs, does really well, comes to Celtic. Billy McNeil, he cut his teeth at Clyde and Aberdeen. Then you had Davy Hay, who had spent time at Motherwell. Liam Brady was completely left field in that respect. I mean, obviously, as an Irish international, there's the Irish fan base loved the idea. I remember us going over to Ireland for pre-season as well. And you're thinking, well, he's got all that experience in English football. And at that point, the Ireland national team was just kind of turning to become this force. I remember 88, the Euros, becoming a force. And he's got the links within that group of players. He's also got the Italian football experience. And you think, well, this should happen. Certainly from his networking perspective, this should work. And I remember, I don't know why it's so vivid in my memory, the guys that we interviewed for the job were Liam Brady, Ivan Golak, who later became the Dundee United manager, Frank Stapleton, and Tommy Craig. So they were the four front runners. Liam gets the job. And Celtic, as a board, we've interviewed one member of that board, Tom Grant, and the interview is on the channel. Tom, still a season ticket holder at Celtic. I thought he was a lovely guy. He's obviously inherited his shares. Dreamlike situation for him being on the Celtic board. And he spoke about how he was a T-boy, and then he took the minutes, and he gradually went through the ranks. He was part of this board. He was also, interestingly enough, kept on by Fergus after the takeover, but the board weren't fit for purpose. I mean, this is the thing. I'm not rewriting history. They were Celtic people through and through, Michael, but the business acumen wasn't there. I mean, they'd inherited their shares and their power at Celtic, and I never really knew how a business worked at that age, or certainly not a football club. But through the pages of the Not The View, who were banging on about the board and becoming a PLC and building a stadium and all the rest of it. Issue 1, 1987. Have a read of it if you've got it. Not The View. It was almost like that Simpsons thing where they see the future. They see the future. They're so entrenched in a situation. They start making all these predictions, and it all came through. We didn't expect it to go so low. And Liam threw a lot of money at it as well. This is the thing that Celtic weren't really famed for being big spenders. We reared our own. We brought them through. We were a selling club, largely. And we started buying players like Tony Cascarino, Gary Gillespie, Stuart Slater, Tony Mowbray. They were the big names, big prices. And it didn't work. And we didn't have the money for it, Michael. We didn't know how to raise the cash. I asked Tom the question. I said, right, you find a player, you identify a player, you want to buy him. How did it work back then? Because we didn't have the cash reserve. We didn't have that. And he was like, well, if we didn't have the money in the bank, we wouldn't go to the bank. We wouldn't go and say, we want to buy Gary Gillespie, give me £1 million. So they basically emptied the coffers and got into debt for the first time during that period, where they were chasing something that Rangers had been doing. But what Rangers had in their favour They had the stadium, and the Taylor report had come through in the interim. We didn't have the stadium. We didn't have the money to renovate it. It was a huge concern. And one of the big things that I find interesting, Michael, we've always in our head got players we would have loved to have seen playing for Celtic. And always go back to that 1988 Scottish Cup final. Kevin Gallagher. Always wanted him to sign for Celtic. He had the connections through his granddad and all this kind of stuff. Tom Grant tells us that genuinely and seriously, they were in for Steve Bruce, Peter Beardsley, and Paul McGrath. You imagine those three guys in the late 80s, early 90s playing for Celtic?
I'd take them now.
Paul McGrath, I know.
Paul McGrath, I've drawn comparisons myself, and he's still got a long way to go, I suppose. But Carter Vickers is, to me, I look at him and I kind of want him to be Paul McGrath, but back then, if we had a player like Paul McGrath, I mean, that is to me the classic centre half, 3 trunk legs. You're not going to buy him, and just absolute ability and a fearsome factor. I know about the Peter Beardsley chat as well. I think that was actually apparently quite close to happening. I mean, I also Kevin Gallagher. I think it's probably a lot of fans of a certain vintage, maybe ours, will probably have seen that goal that he scored against Celtic. He set up the fact that we had such a magical finish to that centenary season, because the goal he scored, you know, I remember him running past Roy Aitken and, you know, another St Andrews Academy Saltcoats man there, Roy Aitken. God, they're all coming to me today. But and Kevin Gallagher to have scored that goal, that was a class strike. And in any other day, that's a goal that could have won a Scottish Cup final or any final. It was a brilliant strike. But if he hadn't done it, it would have been if we had just managed to nick a scrappy goal at the end, it would have been maybe not just as magical. But that showed me, and I've said to JP many a time we've come out of games, maybe win 5-1 or something like that. And he'll say, what do you think of that? It was dominant today. And I says, well, I'm glad they got a goal. It showed they were trying. And Dundee United were trying. But if you had a guy like Kevin Gallagher up front for them, he was there kind of, he put the ball in the net quite a lot. And it would certainly have been somebody there that we could have signed. And I think there was the heritage there that would have went down well as well. But I think also, you got to remember, we did have Mark McGee, we had Frank McAvenny, there was some players there at the time that, Billy Stark, probably one of the more unsung heroes of his time with Celtic, but what a player,
brilliant.
Class. I mean, it's those types of players that sometimes go under the radar a bit, but you're right to kind of try and cherry pick a few there, but it would have been wonderful if we got a hold of some of them. And I wonder if there's Tom Grant's maybe got some regrets or whatever these days, maybe not, but to look back and go, what if we could just have done that, or what if we had put a plan in place to just go get the players that we needed to get? And Celtic's history would be different, but it would be it certainly, I don't think, would have been any worse.
No, some great points you're making there. The first one I would throw in is Dundee United notoriously didn't like selling their players to Scottish teams. I mean, Gough, for example. There was interest in Richard Gough when he left Dundee United. Jim McLean sold up to Spurs. He didn't want to strengthen the opposition. He didn't want to strengthen the Glasgow teams either. And there was a few right good players. Celtic were linked to David Neary a lot earlier on. Class player as well. So I liked Billy McKinlay, who was a Celtic fan as well from that side. I'm going to ask you a question here about. I don't think. By the way, talking about Billy Stark, he must be one of the best uncapped Celts of all time. Never won a Scottish cap. Billy Stark, what a player for Celtic and Aberdeen. After that season, it was wee Joe Miller who was involved in the St Roch's game recently for us, and we've done a few wee bits here and there over the years. And he was telling me about one of these walks, these old-fashioned things, Michael, during days at Sea Mill. There's another wee connection for you. Before a big game, and they would be going for a wee walk, and it was just a way to get your frame of mind right and get a wee bit of blood pumping through your veins. And he ended up going on a wee walk, and he branched out with Billy McNeill, and already Billy, this I think would have been for the Dundee United game. He's already talking about the following season and his plans for the following season and what he wanted to do. And he was saying to wee Joe, he had this idea. He wanted to have the same shape as the Lisbon Lions. He wanted to have the overlapping fullbacks. He wanted to have the wingers. Kind of same shape. And I know one of the best of them again, Bobby Lennox, to use another wee reference point for you. And he's seen Joe Miller as a winger, as a number 7, right? And I'm not saying he compared him to Jinky, but he was our number 7. And wee Joe was never comfortable with that. He in his own mind, thought he was a better centre forward than a right winger. And Billy said that he wanted to bring in 2 or 3 players and really push on the following season in the European Cup. Can you imagine this? It's astonishing now to think about it.
I know.
And then you look at who we brought in. Now, at the time, Pat Bonner had suffered quite a lot of injuries. There was a back injury, an eye injury. And the pre-season after the centenary, you'll remember the Dundee United game, Alan McKnight's in goals. McKnight signs for West Ham. Yeah, so McKnight left for West Ham, £250,000. He wanted to play first-team football because he was getting dropped out the international squads. Pat Bonner was injured. We went on a pre-season after the double-winning side, the double-winning year. We won goalie, and it was Andy Murdoch. And Andy Murdoch got injured whilst on tour. We ended up having to borrow goalkeepers to play the 3 games. And one of the goalies was Hamish McAlpine. So Hamish McAlpine ended up playing in goals for Celtic in one of these friendly games. I think it was in Germany. In another one of the games, the German side we were playing gave us the reserve goalie who played for Celtic. It was weird. And then in the third game, there was another trialist. So we went out and bought 2 goalies. That was our pre-season business. It was Alan Rough, Ian Andrews. Ian Andrews. So Billy wanted to build. He wanted to push on. He wanted to do something in Europe. And he was presented with Alan Rough, who, great goalkeeper in his day, but he was finished by then. And Ian Andrews, and we all remember Andrews for the Ibrox game and all the rest of it.
5 past Andrews and all that.
5 past Andrews. But there was a lack of ambition. And nearer the end of the season, you thought to yourself, wait a minute, we're in for the prodigal son. Can I say his name? Am I allowed to? Have we got a bleeper? Le Petit Merde? Judas? How big a disappointment and how big an impact did that have, do you think, on Celtic and our psyche as a fan base at the time?
It was, to me, it was the ultimate kick in the teeth. Again, I remember the news, because you were getting your news through the radio. You were the Evening Times editions. There was stories coming through, and when we were about to sign your man, and then suddenly when he didn't come over from France and ended up going to the other side of the city, that to me is probably the most disrespectful thing that I can remember, because Billy McNeill, I've got a picture of Billy McNeill on my wall there, right behind me with the cup, and that to me is that is the epitome of Celtic. That was our crowning moment, and I didn't hold anybody in any higher regard than Billy McNeill. And if somebody can turn around and behave like that and do that, it starts to, again, go back to the earlier points there about, why is this not working? Why is he not giving Billy McNeill the same respect as what everybody else does? And it starts to kind of crumble away, and you think, well, it's maybe not till you look at it with a bit more hindsight and you think, well, was Billy McNeill not backed enough by the board? Was he not, although he had aspirations and ambitions, and he clearly had the achievements on his CV about where he had been as a player through the club? I mean, it couldn't have been a better success story in the making for him to be the person that took us to the next level, again, as a European force, this time as manager. So I would say it probably started, there was some very key signs there that things were not going to start to bode well when you start to lose things like that. And it did change a lot of the dynamic. We went from that real high of the centenary season, and then obviously winning the Scottish Cup with Joe Miller's goal the following season. But after that, it was like, that's when you start to think that, wait a minute, we're not getting the backing here that Billy McNeill certainly deserved, and I would have loved him to have got it.
Yeah, you're right though. When you take it down to the human level, the man McNeill, but also having read about that whole period of time, Roy Aitken played a massive part in the deal that Celtic thought they had done. So they're on international duty at the time, and Aiken and Johnston are roommates. And Johnston's saying to him he wants a move back to Celtic. He basically, Celtic aren't tapping him up. That's the other way about it. He wants that move.
Yeah.
And at that time, if you look at his record for Scotland, Michael, listen, I can't stand what he did. It was a moment that shook the football club. If you ever list, 10 moments that shook Celtic Football Club, that's one of them. It was huge at the time. And he was a brilliant player. He was a better player when he come back to Scotland than he was when he left.
Yep.
And to have him paraded in the kit, in the centenary kit, it's desecrating the jersey. It's desecrating the memory of the great man that he was meant to be signing for. And he's letting down Roy Aiken as well. I mean, I had a great discussion with Peter Grant about this. And Granty, you can just imagine him. I mean, if you think you're a Celtic fan, then you look at Grant, and he was talking about the cup final, Scottish Cup final, 1989. I always go back to was it the game before it? We had a run of games where we go to Easter Road, we win 1-0, Joe Miller scores. We then go to Love Street, 1-0, Joe Miller scores, and then the cup final, same thing happens. But Love Street, I always remember as a funny story. Walking down to go to that game, another guy for Saltcoats called Ryan Jackson, actually, him and his dad went through, me and my brother, and we're walking down to go to the game, and Celtic had released the yellow and green kind of Space Invaders style away strip, right? Which at the time was a bit wacky and all that. It's turned into a retro classic now. And there was a guy walking in front of us with number 9 Johnston on the back of his jersey. And this is before names were on the back of football jerseys, Celtic jerseys anyway. Yeah. And he's walking along. And I noticed it. I was like, Johnston's signing for Celtic, and we're at Love Street. And by the way, if you were at the game, tell me if this is a Mandela moment, because I remember in my mind Celtic fans singing Mo Mo Super Mo. This is a week before 2 weeks before the Scottish Cup final against Rangers, who were going for the treble. And he's up in the stand. He's up in the stand with shades on, and summer's day, shades on, sitting next to David Provan. Bizarre. It was a bizarre day. But even more bizarre than that was on the way to the game, Granty tells us, and a few people have spoken about this, Mo Johnston travelled with the Celtic team, Michael. He travelled with the Celtic team to the Scottish Cup final in 1989. And what's worse than that, Peter Grant is determined that Johnston knew what he was about to do. Because there was somebody got past something to sign. And he signed it. Mo Johnston, Rangers FC. Right? And they're going, wait a minute, is he winding somebody up here? And that's how he signed it. And obviously we know what then happened. But after that, I says to Grant, this is a guy that, he was a teammate of yours. You had gone on European trips, potentially shared a room with him, blah, 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 been in the trenches, had successes. What does it do? He says, I never spoke to him. I couldn't bring myself to speak to him again, Michael, because what he did. And, Peter Grant is, if there's an ultimate Celtic fan that's worn the jersey, he's up there with Tommy Burns and the rest of them,
100%.
And he said that years and years later, I think, again, I'd need to check the timeline. I think Grant is back with Celtic during the Tony Mowbray era. I think. But off the top of my head, I can't remember that team going to America. But anyway, they're in the States for some reason. And it's that era. It's years later. They're in the States. And Johnston gets in touch with Grant through the club to say, why don't we meet up? Why don't we meet up for a coffee while you're over here? Right? And Granty was like, wait a minute, I've never spoken to this guy since 1989, maybe after the Scottish Cup final. So he decides, I'll do it. So Johnston tells him, we'll meet here, etc. And Granty's like, how's this going to go? How's this conversation going to go, And apparently Johnston turns up with his 2 boys, and they were both wearing Celtic strips, Michael. These 2 kids are... and I'm like, I still don't understand that moment in Celtic's history. I don't understand why he could do it. No. People in the comments will be saying money. No, there's certain things even money doesn't make you do.
No, it couldn't make you do that. I'm just surprised they never offered to meet him at 2 a.m. behind a industrial estate. I know. There's plenty of wood, but No, it's shameful acts in life, and that's I would have it in the right up there towards the top of the things that you would say, how could you and why did you, and don't darken my door ever again. But yeah, terrible. I think we've...
Apologies. I was chucked out my own broadcast, Michael. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you now. Sorry, I was wondering where you went. There was two of you there for a moment. But,
I just thought to myself, you know what? I'm really going to get you worried and think that you're going to have to end the stream in my absence. Actually, I just got chucked out there. I thought, oh no, don't do this to me. So very quickly, I dived back in. I'll just check my settings. As I say, live telly. There's nothing you can do about it. Audio. Yes, I'm on the right microphone. Sorry about that, ladies and gents. Maybe it's because somebody thought I'm pulling the plug on this. These guys are talking about Mo Johnston. I've had enough of that. Zap, we're off. Right, let's move on for Mojo then.
Oh, please.
Let's do it. It's a pal of mine, Stevie Millen. He always goes back to that moment and says, you know what, that was something that really hit us hard, took us a long time to get over. Then we appoint the wrong manager, we spend the wrong money on the wrong players. And it gets us into that point where we're in deep trouble. We're in deep financial trouble. We've got a stadium to renovate because of the Taylor report. We can't do it. And there's a fan movement. And the reason I went, I opened up talking about community and the fanzine movement is the fan movements that then happened. They were burgeoning movements that the communication started in the fanzines. So you had things like Once a Tim, Matt McGlone's fanzine, Not the View, and a group was formed called Save Our Celts initially, which was Jim Orr, who incidentally is on Next, actually on the weekend with Des McLean. And a group of guys, Willie Wilson being another one. They've both done interviews about this. It's an interesting time for me, Michael, thinking back to all this, because it was about fans coming together. That group fell by the wayside eventually, and Celts for Change came along with Matt and Brendan Sweeney and various others. And they were a street movement. It was a community-based movement. Everybody wanted the best for Celtic. But even back then, Michael, there were polarised views on who was in the right and who was in the wrong. There were people saying, oh, the board are doing a fine job, and this is the reasons why it's not working. It's nothing to do with the board. And Jim's spoken about it. There was people who were opposing the views of these fan groups. But it's no surprise, is it?
No. You're always kind of going to get that. And I think a lot of Celtic fans, probably through the 60s, 70s, when you're passing it from generation to generation, there's a kind of, it can't be that bad. We'll always get there, and we've been probably spoiled with success in those areas as well, where sometimes there's a lot of folk that don't maybe want to rock the boat, and it's just as simple as that. They treat it as just a game. They treat it as just the team on the pitch, and that's the be all and the end all. I would always want to question the board, but I would always try and prioritise the team first and foremost. And I've seen what happens. It probably comes through the times of seeing what success doesn't look like and growing up in places like Ayrshire, but when it's rammed down your throat, you really, they're dark days. And trust me, it will be dark days, very dark days for those on the other side that are experiencing it on the other foot just now. And I think there's a difference between maybe sometimes questioning the board and the board becoming your priority. The board still have a job to do, in my view, right? But they need to be held to account. And I think the way that we run our business these days and how we run it back then, very, very different. But people did waking up, as you say. We've grown up there as kids, maybe learning more about what's going on in the boardroom. And now you've got everybody tuned into the fact it's all over the place, how much money that is involved in the game these days as well. There's a considerable investment that comes. The amount of money that Celtic even won the other night from just winning that one match in the Champions League, it was, these are game-changing amounts of cash that can maybe go and sign these players, Majowski or whoever from Aberdeen. But back then, it really was the biscuit tin, and that was something there that was, I suppose, a learning curve for people that they'll probably take into nowadays, and we're not going to be bitten twice. There's probably that fear that something, if we don't hold the board to account, we could go back down a similar route to what we had before. But it looks to me that Paul John's actually jumped off, guys. So I'm back here myself. I might as well take the opportunity then rather than cut off. But one of the reasons, if anybody that did happen to tune in the first time I was on the programme, and with it being a charity weekend, some people might know me as Taggy Boy. I am a Celtic FC Foundation Supporters Committee member. I'm the event lead for a major event we've got coming up, and a lot of people I know have already bought their tickets for it. But I'll give it a plug just now till Paul John gets himself hopefully back in here. So we're having a supporters committee dinner, all in aid of the Celtic FC Foundation, and that's on Saturday the 23rd of March. We're having it at the Crown Plaza this year again, where it's been for the last couple of years. So I recently had joined the Foundation Supporters Committee as a result of previous work I've done with the Celtic FC Foundation. I've been to places such as Zambia. I did that for my 40th birthday a few years back, and thanks to everybody that's continued to support the Celtic FC Foundation, and myself included, with that type of work. So lots and lots of things going on. Anybody that's attending games, you'll probably chuck money into bucket collections and so on. But equally, there's a lot of the money that comes in. We spoke recently about how it does help to benefit every aspect of the community out there, not just the Celtic supporting community. The work that the Celtic FC Foundation do is it's quite jaw-dropping. It's eye-opening for a number of projects they're involved with. The Paradise Pit Stop, that's a warm meal that's provided four days a week. There's opportunities to go and get involved. Anybody, it's absolutely anonymous. You can turn up to Celtic Park, and in these really tough times, there's a warm meal there for people. 2 hours of 4 days a week. So that's a Monday, a Wednesday, a Thursday and Friday. So check out the Celtic website and also Celtic FC Foundation links that are there. But I am delighted that Paul John has joined us back. But that's twice now you've went away.
Michael, I'll not do it again.
And some little bits about the Celtic FC Foundation. I don't know if you caught any of it, but thanks for joining us back.
Wow. What's just happened there is everything just went off, the whole shebang. And I thought to myself, when I come back, Michael, I thought, I'm off-ski. The fact that you didn't chuck it, there and you kept it going, hats off to you, by the way. Thank you so much, Michael. And apologies to everybody that I was thrown out again. We're not going to mention them again. We're definitely not. Let's pull it right back up to date. And quite rightly, you were promoting everything, the great work that you do. Some of the stuff that the foundation does is astonishing. And you guys, with your charity endeavours and raising awareness and funds, and obviously doing it on a live setting as well. One of the greatest things for me, though, Michael, was the fact that you were able to use the Glory in the Dream song in your promo, your wee advert, because the Wakes, of course, are going to be playing at your gig.
That's it. No, and very grateful for the opportunity to use that. It really did help us get things off with a bang. We are delighted to have Paul Sheridan and the Wakes along for the event on the 23rd of March. We've got a lot of things planned for that particular evening, but the likes of that song about the foundation of the club, where we come from. Our strapline is our foundation, the Celtic way. So that is going to be the theme. Going back towards our roots, to me, it's really important. And again, I suppose as a Celtic dad, it's important that my kids get to see it, and I'm sure there's others that absolutely are. It's important to pass on where we come from as a club, where we were formed, what we're all about, what should still be absolute mainstream as being a Celtic fan. To me, it's not just about turning up and, it's the Champions League, we'll go tonight because it's a big game, or we'll not go because it's not as big a Champions League game as we thought we would get. Go back to the actual roots, where we come from, why we were formed, and we'll probably help to tell the story at that event. You know, it's a dinner. We'll be going back to the fact of how Celtic were formed with over a meal, and we'll really be able to start something there with hopefully some new people coming along to the event this year as well. Over the last couple of years, it's been a right success. I joined the committee earlier towards the end of the summer to help promote, and we've been able to already see that there's some new people joining that haven't been to the dinner yet, and I hope that continues because we've still got some tickets available. They are available on links that you'll find on the Celtic FC Foundation website, and also on my own Twitter. I think I have it pinned, or my own X. I still can't say that. You'll find links to be able to get tickets. But no, really important for us. And it's, although we're asking people to spend money, I think the bit that is important to remember is that money's not going to us. It's not going to Celtic. It's not going to a transfer kitty. It's not going to heat driveways or anything like that. This is absolutely going to help people in the community that need it the most. And the work that is done is, I've seen it abroad. I've seen it in Zambia firsthand, what happens over there. But I've also seen what's going on locally here in Scotland and in and around Glasgow and around UK and Ireland. My goodness, if people can get behind it, it's what a charity weekend is all about. But you know, I'm very keen to promote that, and always happy to. I'll be jumping on the Leith CSC supporters bus with the kids later on. We'll go to the match, but they guys, big shout out to them because they were the first ones to put their hands up and say we'll sponsor a couple of tables. So sponsorship opportunities are there, and that to me is, these are guys you go to the football with every week. They're there every week, and God bless every one of them.
Oh, what a way to end. And by the way, the work you're doing is phenomenal, Michael. The fact that you didn't just throw in the towel and pull the plug yourself there is phenomenal. And I thank you for that. You've kept the ball rolling. Thank you so much. Next up is Jim Orr and Des McLean. So go to where you watch Acsom, be that on the socials or on the YouTube channel. And we will be, look at this. The good thing is you get loads of sympathy for people. PJ is having a mare. You're right, Brian, an absolute mare. But thankfully, Michael kept the thing going. Thank you very much, every single one of you. And we will keep this going. It's Jim Orr, Bend It Like Bertie, along with Des McLean. Funny man, Des. He's a great guy as well. Michael, enjoy the game today. Let's go and get the result that we want. Enjoy it with your family. Enjoy it with the community that we've been talking about. And if there's anything else we can do to promote your big night next year, just give us a shout, pal.
And the leprechaun flag, keep an eye out for it. It's a wee reminder to buy tickets for that event. Good man.
100%. Take care. Thanks everybody for getting involved, and we'll be back on YouTube in just a few minutes with Jim Orr and Des McLean.